sorry I did that. I'd have rather cut off my hand. I'd never have taken the job if I hadn't wanted to keep us all together.
I don't think the public knows what that Oscar means to us.
What if I told you that some of Hollywood's most daring films, starring its biggest legends, were locked away, banned, and nearly forgotten? These aren't obscure movies. These are bold stories that terrified studios, outraged censors, and challenged everything society believed at the time. From powerful women refusing to follow the rules, to stories of love, lust, and rebellion, Hollywood didn't just ban these films. It tried to erase them forever. Why? Because these movies showed women as strong, independent, and unapologetic, something too dangerous for the era's moral gatekeepers. Today, we're uncovering 25 banned old films that the Golden Age wanted you to forget. Some were hidden for decades, others barely survived at all. So, which iconic stars found themselves censored? And what scenes were considered so scandalous they vanished from history? Stay with us, because you're about to see the side of Hollywood they never wanted you to know. Babyface, 1933. Barbara Stanwyck's Forbidden Seduction. In 1933, Barbara Stanwyck lit up the screen in Babyface, but not as the sweet, innocent woman audiences were used to seeing. Instead, she played Lily Powers, a woman who unapologetically used her beauty and charm to climb the corporate ladder by seducing every man in her way. At a time when women were expected to be modest and obedient, Lily's character was too bold, too empowered, and far too dangerous for conservative America. The film's message? Use what you've got to get ahead, a notion that sent censors into a panic. Babyface was quickly labeled immoral, triggering outrage that helped lead to the strict enforcement of the Hays Code, Hollywood's answer to cleaning up movies. The most daring scenes were cut, and the film was buried for decades. It wasn't until the 2000s that the original, uncut version resurfaced, revealing just how ahead of its time Stanwyck's performance really was. "I wasn't playing a bad woman," Stanwyck once said. "I was playing a woman surviving in a man's world." But Babyface wasn't the only film that pushed boundaries in 1933. Just when Hollywood thought it had seen enough scandal, another film arrived, and this time, it was even darker. Enter The Story of Temple Drake. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. A shocking tale, led by Miriam Hopkins. If Babyface made censors nervous, The Story of Temple Drake sent them into full panic mode. Based on the controversial novel Sanctuary by William Faulkner, this film didn't just hint at taboo subjects, it put them front and center. Miriam Hopkins starred as Temple Drake, a wealthy young woman who finds herself kidnapped and assaulted by criminals. The film's brutal depiction of sexual violence, corruption, and survival was unlike anything audiences had seen before. Censors called it a threat to public decency, and several states outright banned the film. Critics argued that Temple's fall from grace and her complex choices challenged the era's strict moral codes, where women were either pure or punished. Hopkins later reflected, Temple wasn't a victim or a villain. She was human, but Hollywood didn't want women to be human back then. The backlash from Temple Drake played a huge role in Hollywood clamping down on what stories could be told, especially when they dared to show women in complicated, realistic situations. But while Temple Drake was banned for being too dark, the next film on Hollywood's blacklist was banned for something far more scandalous: laughter at the expense of morality. Because when Jean Harlow starred in Red-Headed Woman, America wasn't ready for a woman who enjoyed breaking the rules. Red-Headed Woman, 1932. Jean Harlow's role that outraged America. In Red-Headed Woman, Jean Harlow wasn't playing a damsel in distress. She was playing Lil Andrews, a gold digger who didn't just chase rich men. She outsmarted them, seduced them, and tossed them aside when she was done. Filled with witty one-liners, sexual innuendos, and a lead character who never repents, Red-Headed Woman was a slap in the face to traditional values. Lil didn't suffer for her sins, she thrived because of them. That was too much for censors across the US and Europe. The film was banned in several regions and heavily edited elsewhere. They didn't like that I had fun playing bad, Harlow reportedly joked, but the audience loved it. The film became a symbol of pre-code Hollywood, when movies dared to show women as more than just virtuous wives or tragic figures. But while Harlow's mischief was playful, the next banned film crossed a line that censors couldn't ignore. Because when Jane Russell stepped onto the screen, it wasn't her words that caused controversy. It was her very appearance. The Outlaw, 1943. Jane Russell and the Censored Cleavage. When Howard Hughes cast Jane Russell in The Outlaw, he wasn't just making a Western, he was crafting a scandal. The film focused less on plot and more on showcasing Russell's figure, especially in promotional posters that highlighted her revealing wardrobe. Religious groups and censorship boards erupted in outrage, calling the film indecent before it even premiered. The controversy wasn't about violence or crime. It was about a woman's body being displayed too boldly for 1940s standards. Banned and shelved for years, The Outlaw only saw the light of day after heavy edits. Yet by then, the damage, or the publicity, was done. Russell later said, "They made me famous before anyone even saw the movie." But while The Outlaw teased with suggestion, the next film shattered every boundary with a scene no one had ever dared to put on screen before. Because when Hedy Lamarr starred in Ecstasy, Hollywood, and the world were never the same again. Ecstasy, 1933. Hedy Lamarr's nude scene that shocked the world. Before she became a Hollywood legend and groundbreaking inventor, Hedy Lamarr was at the center of one of cinema's biggest scandals. In Ecstasy, an Austrian film released in 1933, Lamarr appeared in what is considered the first nude scene by a major actress. Though filmed in Europe, the moment sent shockwaves across the globe. When Ecstasy tried to enter U.S. theaters, it was swiftly banned for being obscene. Religious leaders condemned it, and Lamarr's name became forever linked to controversy. "I was young, and I didn't think it would follow me forever," Lamarr once said of the role that haunted her career. Despite her later success in Hollywood, she could never fully escape the shadow of Ecstasy. The film was suppressed, censored, and hidden away for decades. But, as we've seen, Hollywood had a habit of punishing women who dared to push boundaries, whether through words, actions, or simply by existing too boldly on screen. And Hedy Lamarr wasn't the last. The next woman to face Hollywood's moral wrath? None other than Marlene Dietrich, making a risque comeback in Blonde Venus. Blonde Venus, 1932. Marlene Dietrich's risque comeback. When Marlene Dietrich returned to the screen in Blonde Venus, she wasn't playing it safe. As a cabaret singer forced into scandalous choices to save her family, Dietrich blurred the lines between sacrifice and seduction. The film tackled adultery, female independence, and survival in a world dominated by men, topics that rattled censors. Dietrich's glamorous, defiant persona only added fuel to the fire. Scenes of her iconic nightclub performances, draped in shimmering costumes, were deemed far too provocative for audiences. Several countries banned the film outright, while U.S. censors demanded cuts. Dietrich's allure was seen not as entertainment, but as a threat to moral standards. Reflecting on her career, Dietrich once said, "I dress for the image, not for the man." But in Blonde Venus, it was clear that even an image could scare Hollywood's gatekeepers. And while Dietrich's defiance was draped in silk and song, the next banned film brought rebellion to the heart of Southern tradition. With a performance so bold, it earned both an Oscar and a ban. Enter Bette Davis in Jezebel. Jezebel, 1938. Bette Davis and a story too bold for some states. In Jezebel, Bette Davis played a woman who didn't just break the rules, she shattered them. As Julie Marsden, a headstrong Southern belle, Davis portrayed a woman unafraid to challenge society's expectations, especially when it came to power and sexuality. Her character's defiance, symbolized by wearing a scandalous red dress to a conservative ball, was too much for certain audiences. In parts of the American South, the film was banned for promoting female rebellion and undermining traditional gender roles. Ironically, Davis won an Academy Award for the very performance censors tried to silence. "Without bad behavior," Davis quipped, "there's no drama." But while Jezebel faced regional bans, Joan Crawford's next role would find itself blacklisted across multiple countries for daring to show a woman using ambition and desire as her weapons. Because in Possessed, Joan Crawford didn't ask for permission. She took what she wanted. Possessed, 1931, Joan Crawford as a woman who refused to play nice. In Possessed, Joan Crawford wasn't content to play the good girl. She starred as a factory worker who becomes the mistress of a wealthy politician, not through love, but through calculated ambition. For 1931 audiences, a woman using her sexuality and intelligence to rise in society without apology was simply unacceptable. The film was quickly banned in several regions for encouraging vice and corrupting moral values. Crawford, however, embraced the controversy. "I never played weak. Women," she said. "Why should I? They're not interesting." But if Possessed shocked viewers by showing a woman taking control, the next film horrified censors by daring to show a woman embracing her freedom after marriage. Norma Shearer wasn't just the divorcee, she was a revolution on screen. The Divorcee, 1930, Norma Shearer redefines female desire. When Norma Shearer starred in The Divorcee, she redefined what a woman could be on screen. After discovering her husband's infidelity, Shearer's character doesn't cry in a corner. She retaliates, embracing her own sexual freedom. This bold take on female independence sent shockwaves through conservative audiences. The idea that a woman could make her own choices about love and desire was too progressive for 1930. The Divorcee was banned in Ireland and heavily censored elsewhere, but still managed to win Shearer an Oscar. She famously said, "I wanted to show women they didn't have to be doormats." But while Shearer's rebellion was elegant, Joan Crawford returned with a role that dragged Hollywood into even murkier waters, combining sin, salvation, and scandal in a film religious groups wanted erased completely. Because when Rain hit theaters, it was more than a storm. It was a full-blown moral crisis. Rain, 1932, Joan Crawford's salvation scandal. In Rain, Joan Crawford took on one of her most controversial roles, playing Sadie Thompson, a prostitute stranded on a Pacific island, facing off against a fanatical missionary determined to save her. The film didn't shy away from themes of sin, redemption, and hypocrisy, sparking outrage from religious organizations. They called for bans, claiming Rain glorified immoral behavior and insulted faith. The film was suppressed in conservative U.S. states and outright banned in several countries. Crawford, known for fearless roles, didn't back down. Sadie wasn't evil, Crawford said. She was real, and that scared them. But Hollywood wasn't done censoring powerful women. Up next was a film where a female CEO dared to take charge, and for that, she had to be silenced. Ruth Chatterton's Female showed what happens when a woman has too much power in a man's world. Female, 1933, Ruth Chatterton as the boss Hollywood feared. In a time when women were expected to stay silent and submissive, Female dared to ask, what if a woman ran the show? Ruth Chatterton starred as Allison Drake, a powerful CEO who controlled her company and her love life with the same authority as any male executive. Allison wasn't waiting for romance or approval. She called the shots at work and entertained a series of lovers without guilt or consequence. For 1933, this was revolutionary. And for Hollywood's censors, it was unacceptable. The film was quickly flagged as dangerous, not for violence or crime, but for showing a woman in complete control. Too progressive, they said. To satisfy the growing pressure of the Hays Code, the ending was changed, forcing Allison to give up her power and embrace marriage, as if that were her true destiny all along. But even with the altered ending, female was banned in multiple regions, buried as a cautionary tale of what happens when a woman dares to lead without apology. Ruth Chatterton once remarked, "They weren't afraid of my character's mistakes. They were afraid of her success." And while Female was censored for showing too much female strength, the next film faced an even harsher fate, simply for exploring the fragile line between sanity and survival. Because when Blanche Sweet starred in The Painted Lady, Hollywood decided mental illness was too disturbing to be seen. The Painted Lady, 1912, Blanche Sweet, and early censorship. Before Hollywood had sound, before the glamour of the Golden Age, there was Blanche Sweet, one of silent cinema's first true stars. In The Painted Lady, Sweet delivered a haunting performance as a lonely woman battling isolation, rejection, and a descent into madness. Directed by D.W. Griffith, this short film was groundbreaking for its raw portrayal of mental illness and violence. But in 1912, audiences weren't ready for such darkness, especially when told through the eyes of a troubled female lead. Censors deemed the film inappropriate and too disturbing for public viewing. It was pulled from circulation, effectively erased from early cinematic history. Blanche Sweet later reflected, "We told human stories, but they only wanted fairy tales." The Painted Lady became a forgotten relic, proof that even in Hollywood's infancy, stories about complex women were the first to be silenced. But while Sweet's quiet tragedy was hidden away, another actress would soon find herself at the center of a far louder scandal, one filled with masks, seduction, and a film so bizarre, Hollywood tried to pretend it never happened. That film was Madame Satan. Madame Satan, 1930, Kay Johnson in a masked scandal. When Kay Johnson donned a mask and a skin-tight costume in Madame Satan, Hollywood didn't know what to make of it. Part musical, part surreal fantasy, the film followed a woman who crashes her husband's wild party disguised as a seductive temptress. With daring costumes, suggestive themes, and scenes set aboard a decadent airship filled with half-dressed partygoers, Madame Satan pushed boundaries no one was prepared for. Critics called it morally corrupt, and religious groups demanded bans. The film flopped at the box office, and MGM quickly distanced itself, burying the movie in shame. For years, it was treated like an embarrassment, too strange, too risque, and far too bold for its time. Kay Johnson never shied away from her role, famously saying, "If being daring is a sin, then I was guilty." But while Madame Satan vanished into obscurity, Barbara Stanwyck would soon face her own controversy, this time for something even more scandalous: falling in love with the wrong man on screen. Because in the bitter tea of General Yen, love became a crime. The Bitter Tea of General Yen, 1933, Barbara Stanwyck, and Forbidden Love. At a time when Hollywood strictly avoided controversial relationships, The Bitter Tea of General Yen shattered taboos. Barbara Stanwyck starred as a missionary who falls for a Chinese warlord, a daring portrayal of interracial romance that sent shockwaves through 1930s America. Audiences weren't outraged by violence or crime, they were outraged by love. The idea of a white woman sharing intimate scenes with an Asian man was too provocative for the era's racial prejudices. The film was banned in several U.S. cities and outright rejected in the South. Despite critical praise for its artistry and Stanwyck's performance, it was quietly suppressed and forgotten by mainstream Hollywood. Stanwyck, never one to regret bold choices, later said, "I played a woman who followed her heart. That was the real scandal." But if Forbidden Love could get a film banned, imagine what would happen when Marlene Dietrich stepped on screen wearing a tuxedo and kissed a woman. Morocco wasn't just a movie. It was a challenge to everything society thought it knew about gender. Morocco, 1930, Marlene Dietrich's Tuxedo Kiss. When Marlene Dietrich walked onto the screen in Morocco, dressed in a tuxedo and top hat, audiences gasped. But it wasn't just her attire that caused a stir. It was the moment she leaned down and kissed a woman on the lips. In 1930, this wasn't seen as playful or artistic. It was seen as indecent. The gender-bending performance, combined with themes of sexual freedom and rebellion, led to Morocco being banned in several countries and censored heavily in the US. Dietrich didn't care. She knew exactly what she was doing. "I dress for myself," she declared, "and I kiss who I like." While Morocco cemented Dietrich as a queer icon, Hollywood worked hard to downplay the film's legacy, editing scenes, limiting its release, and trying to erase a moment that was far ahead of its time. But Dietrich's kiss was just the beginning. The next film would take on sin, salvation, and society's deepest fears, starring Gloria Swanson as a woman too fallen for Hollywood to forgive. Because when Sadie Thompson hit theaters, it wasn't just a story. It was a scandal waiting to explode. Sadie Thompson, 1928. Gloria Swanson in Silent Era. Scandal before Hollywood had sound, it already had scandal. In Sadie Thompson, Gloria Swanson delivered one of the most daring performances of the silent era. She played Sadie, a woman with a troubled past, escaping to a remote island, only to clash with a self-righteous missionary determined to save her soul. The film tackled themes of prostitution, religious hypocrisy, and redemption, subjects that made conservative audiences deeply uncomfortable. Religious groups protested the film's sympathetic portrayal of a so-called fallen woman, and censors wasted no time. Sadie Thompson was banned in several U.S. states and countries abroad. Swanson, never one to apologize for bold roles, stood by her performance. "Sadie wasn't a sinner," she once said. "She was a survivor." Despite critical acclaim, the film was nearly lost to time due to censorship pressures and decaying film reels. Only fragments survived, a reminder of how Hollywood often erased stories that gave flawed women a voice. But while Sadie Thompson was silenced for showing a woman's fight for dignity, Loretta Young's next film was banned for something even more shocking, daring to show a woman raising a child on her own. Because in Born to be Bad, independence became a crime. Born to be Bad, 1934. Loretta Young as a single mother scandal. When Loretta Young took on the role of an unwed mother in Born to be Bad, she knew the story would stir controversy, but few expected the level of backlash that followed. In 1934, portraying a woman who not only has a child out of wedlock, but refuses to be ashamed of it, was unheard of. The film showed Young's character navigating life with resilience, defying the expectation that women like her should suffer or repent. Censors were outraged. The film was banned outright in many regions for promoting what they called immoral behavior. To them, the idea of a strong, independent single mother was more dangerous than any gangster film. Loretta Young later reflected, "They wanted women to hide in shame. I played a woman who refused." Hollywood quickly buried Born to be Bad, ensuring it wouldn't influence other women to think they could live life on their own terms. But while Young's scandal was rooted in social norms, the next film was banned for something far darker, blurring the lines between horror, sexuality, and human nature. When Kathleen Burke became the Panther Woman in Island of Lost Souls, Hollywood recoiled in fear. Island of Lost Souls, 1922. Kathleen Burke's Panther Woman. Island of Lost Souls wasn't just a horror film, it was a nightmare that censors couldn't wake up from. Based on H.G. Wells's The Island of Dr. Moreau, it featured Kathleen Burke as the infamous Panther Woman, a seductive hybrid of human and beast. The film's unsettling mix of science fiction, sexual tension, and grotesque imagery was too much for 1930s audiences. Its themes of playing God, creating unnatural creatures, and the provocative portrayal of Burke's character led to widespread bans. Countries like the UK and Germany banned the film for decades, calling it depraved and morally corrupt. Burke, whose role became iconic in horror history, once said, They were more afraid of my character's desires than the monsters. Island of Lost Souls was locked away, deemed too dangerous for public eyes, until it resurfaced as a cult classic years later. But if censors hated horror mixed with seduction, they were even more outraged by a film that let a femme fatale get away with her sins. Joan Bennett's Scarlet Street wasn't just dark, it was unforgivable. Scarlet Street, 1945. Joan Bennett's femme fatale, too dangerous to show. In Scarlet Street, Joan Bennett played one of cinema's most ruthless femme fatales. Her character, Kitty, manipulates, deceives, and ruins a desperate man, all without facing traditional punishment by the film's end. For censors, this was unacceptable. The idea that an immoral woman could walk away unscathed was a direct violation of the era's moral code. Several U.S. cities and entire countries banned the film, declaring it a threat to public decency. Director Fritz Lang refused to change the ending, insisting that real life wasn't always about neat justice. Bennett, too, embraced the controversy. Kitty was bad, she said, but she was also smart, and that's what scared them. Scarlet Street was pulled from theaters, erased from circulation in conservative markets, and labeled too dangerous for audiences. But while Joan Bennett's crime was surviving, Marlene Dietrich's next scandalous role was all about destruction. Seduction so powerful, it led a man to ruin. Because in The Blue Angel, temptation wasn't just a theme. It was a death sentence. The Blue Angel, 1930, Marlene Dietrich's role that redefined temptation. Before she became a Hollywood legend, Marlene Dietrich mesmerized audiences in The Blue Angel, a film that would define her career and scandalize the world. As Lola Lola, a cabaret singer whose allure leads a respectable professor into obsession and disgrace, Dietrich embodied pure temptation. Her sultry performances, revealing costumes, and unapologetic sexuality shocked early 1930s audiences. The film's raw portrayal of lust, downfall, and moral decay led to it being banned in several countries, including parts of the U.S. Religious groups condemned it as corrupt and dangerous. Dietrich, unfazed by the outrage, famously said, "If they're scandalized, they're paying attention." Despite attempts to suppress it, The Blue Angel survived, cementing Dietrich as an icon of seduction and strength. But while Dietrich embraced her scandal, the next actress would face censorship simply for speaking, and for daring to bring a sinful past to the silver screen. Because when Greta Garbo uttered her first words in Anna Christie, Hollywood tried to silence her. Anna Christie, 1930, Greta Garbo's sinful return to the screen. When Greta Garbo spoke her first line in Anna Christie, audiences were stunned. The silent film queen's deep, sultry voice delivered the now iconic words, "Gimme a whiskey." But it wasn't just Garbo's voice that caused a stir, it was the role itself. In Anna Christie, Garbo played a woman with a scandalous past, returning home after years working in brothels. The film didn't shy away from themes of prostitution, redemption, and society's harsh judgment of women trying to rebuild their lives. For 1930, it was too much. While Garbo's performance was praised, the film was banned in several European countries and heavily censored elsewhere. Moral watchdogs argued that Anna's story was too sympathetic toward fallen women. Garbo, as always, remained mysterious about the controversy, but once remarked, "I live for those who understand silence and scandal." Despite censorship, Anna Christie proved Garbo could conquer both silent and talking pictures. But Hollywood wasn't finished burying films that dared to humanize society's outcasts. Because the next film didn't just disturb audiences, it terrified them. When Freaks hit theaters, Hollywood decided some people and some stories were better hidden. Freaks, 1932, Layla Hyams in a film too disturbing for Hollywood. Few films shook Hollywood like Freaks. Directed by Todd Browning and starring Layla Hyams, This horror drama featured real sideshow performers in a tale of betrayal, revenge, and the true meaning of monstrosity. But it wasn't the story alone that horrified audiences. It was the raw, unfiltered portrayal of physical difference. Viewers weren't ready to confront what society tried to keep hidden. The film was labeled grotesque, exploitative, and was swiftly banned in multiple countries, including the UK, for over 30 years. Hyams defended the film, saying, "It wasn't about horror, it was about humanity. That's what scared them." Freaks was pulled from theaters, heavily edited, and nearly lost forever. What was meant to challenge perceptions became a film Hollywood wished had never existed. But while Freaks was erased for being too real, the next banned film was silenced for celebrating a woman who dared to choose passion over propriety. Norma Shearer's A Free Soul showed that when a woman claimed her freedom, Hollywood was quick to shut the door. A Free Soul, 1931. Norma Shearer's scandalous independence. In A Free Soul, Norma Shearer played a woman who wasn't afraid to love dangerously. Her character, Jan Ash, leaves behind her wealthy, sheltered life to pursue a passionate affair with a gangster, played by Clark Gable. Jan wasn't punished for her choices, she owned them. And that's exactly why the film was banned in several conservative areas. Censors claimed it glorified crime, and worse, female sexual freedom. Shearer, who had fought for roles that depicted strong, independent women, stood by her performance. "I wanted to show that women could make their own mistakes and survive them," she said. Despite critical acclaim, A Free Soul became another victim of the tightening grip of Hollywood's moral codes. And while Shearer's rebellion was wrapped in romance, Clara Bow's next film was banned simply for being too much fun and too much of a bad influence. Because The Wild Party was exactly what its name promised, and that was enough to get it erased. The Wild Party, 1929. Clara Bow's flapper lifestyle. Known as the original It Girl, Clara Bow embodied the spirit of the Roaring Twenties. Carefree, rebellious, and unapologetically modern. In The Wild Party, Bow played a college girl who enjoyed life a little too much for 1929 standards. The film featured drinking, partying, and women embracing their freedom. A direct reflection of flapper culture. But when the decade ended and America sobered up, censors declared The Wild Party banned for promoting loose morals and corrupting young women. Clara Bow shrugged off the criticism, famously saying, "They don't like girls who have a good time, unless they're pretending." Hollywood quickly distanced itself from Bow's rebellious image, and The Wild Party was buried as a relic of a decade that many wanted to forget. But while Bow's film was banned for being too lively, the final film on our list was silenced for something far darker. A tale of revenge, exploitation, and human suffering. Mary Nolan's West of Zanzibar pushed boundaries so far, Hollywood made sure it would disappear. West of Zanzibar, 1928. Mary Nolan in A Tale of Revenge and Vice. Closing. Our list is West of Zanzibar, a film so grim, so unsettling, that Hollywood didn't just ban it, it tried to erase it from memory. Starring Mary Nolan alongside Lon Chaney, the film told a harrowing story of betrayal, cruelty, and revenge set in colonial Africa. Nolan's character is subjected to exploitation, degradation, and tragedy in a narrative filled with dark themes that shocked even the most liberal audiences of the late 1920s. Censors called it disturbing, immoral, and unfit for public viewing. The film was banned in several countries and quickly pulled from circulation after its initial run. Mary Nolan, whose career was already marked by personal struggles and industry backlash, became yet another actress tied to a film Hollywood wanted forgotten. I only told the story they gave me, Nolan once said. But some stories, they'd rather you never hear. West of Zanzibar became a symbol of how far Hollywood would go to silence films that exposed too much pain, too much truth, especially when told through the eyes of women.